Let's go Broncos! The conversation around Riley Moss is getting louder, and the most important part of this story is not just whether he deserves a future contract extension. It is how he is handling the pressure right now, because when he was asked directly by Luka Evans about whether that contract situation has crossed his mind, Riley's answer was calm, direct, and exactly the kind of response Broncos fans should pay attention to. He said he has not really thought about it, that it will handle itself like it always has, that he trusts in God and trusts in himself, and that he is simply going to go out, do his thing, continue doing his thing, and let the rest take care of itself. And before we go deeper into this, make sure you already hit the like button if you have been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 20 years. It is always great to see Broncos fans of every age still riding with orange and blue. If possible, comment this, "Go Broncos! My heart bleeds orange and blue." Now let's get straight to the point, because this is where the situation gets really interesting. Riley Moss is not acting like a player distracted by money. He is not giving the kind of answer that creates drama. He is not pushing the conversation toward negotiations, numbers, or pressure on the organization. Instead, he is putting the focus on the field. And honestly, that matters, because this is a player with a very complicated evaluation in front of him. There's a lot to like. There is also a lot that still has to be cleaned up. The good part of Riley Moss' game is obvious. He had 19 pass breakups, tied for first last year. That is not a small number. That means the ball is finding him, quarterbacks are testing him, and he is still making plays at the catch point. He also allowed a 53.4 completion percentage, which was mentioned as 11th best among qualifying corners. That is real production. That is the type of stat that makes you understand why people inside and outside Broncos country still see serious upside in his game. But this story is not complete if we only talk about the highlights. Riley Moss also had 80 tackles, 19 pass breakups, and only 1 interception, while allowing 68 receptions and being flagged for 10 defensive pass interference calls. That is where the debate begins. Because on one side, fans can point to the flashes. They can point to the diving pass breakups, the sticky coverage, the acrobatic finishes, and the plays where he looks like he absolutely belongs in a major role. But on the other side, there are numbers that cannot simply be ignored. He allowed 21 downfield receptions, which was mentioned as the 6th most among qualifying corners. He allowed 859 receiving yards, which was mentioned as the 3rd most in the NFL. And those 10 defensive pass interference penalties still count, even if many Broncos fans believe some of those calls were unfair. That is the difficult part of evaluating Riley Moss. You can believe he was picked on. You can believe some calls went against him unfairly. You can believe being on the other side of Pat Certain changed the way offenses attacked him. But at the end of the day, the penalties are still on the record, and the yards are still part of the discussion. That is why this contract conversation is so much bigger than just one player saying the right thing. Riley Moss is entering a situation where every snap, every practice, every preseason rep, and every training camp battle can shape the way the Broncos look at his future. And according to the discussion in the material, Sean Payton has given Jody Barron a chance to compete at the outside cornerback spot. That does not mean Riley Moss is already losing anything. It means the competition is real. It means the Broncos are not treating the cornerback 2 role like it is already permanently decided. And that should get every Broncos fan's attention, because this is not about disrespecting Riley Moss. This is about understanding that the NFL is built on competition. If Riley Moss wants the extension, if he wants the long-term security, if he wants to prove he is more than just a player with flashes, then this is the exact type of challenge that can define him. He has already shown the ability to make plays. He has already shown he can battle. But now the question becomes whether he can turn those exciting moments into consistent, clean, reliable football. The Broncos also have a larger issue sitting behind this entire conversation. Riley Moss is not the only starter heading toward a contract year. The material also mentions Mims, Jaquan McMillian, Powers, Evan Ingram, and Brandon Jones as first-team players or starters heading into contract years. That matters because fans sometimes say, just re-sign everyone, but that is not how a roster works. The Broncos cannot simply hand out big multi-year deals to every important player without thinking about the salary cap. The material points out that the 2027 cap space, at least at that moment, was listed at $1.7 million, and that cap space is fluid. Still, the point is clear, every decision connects to another decision. That is where Riley Moss' situation becomes even more intense. The discussion suggested that Jaquan McMillian could want around $11 million to $13 million a year. Mims could want around $11 million to $14 million a year. and Riley Moss could want around $17 million a year. Powers, Evan Ingram, and Brandon Jones were also described as players who could want a lot of money. So when you look at Riley's future, you cannot separate it from the bigger picture. The Broncos have to decide who is worth paying, who is replaceable, who fits the cap, and who gives them the best value going forward. That is why Riley's answer is so important. He is not adding pressure. He is not feeding speculation. He is saying the only thing he can control is his football. And for a player in his position, that might be the smartest possible mindset. He knows the good is there. He knows the criticism is there. He knows the competition is there. He knows the contract question is there. But instead of making it a distraction, he is choosing to go back to work. The pressure around Riley Moss does not stop with his own contract, because the Broncos have to think bigger than one player, one position battle, or one popular debate among fans. This is about the way a team protects itself from future cap problems while still trying to keep enough talent on the roster. And that is why the idea of simply re-signing everyone sounds nice in the comment section, but it does not match the reality of how the league works. When fans say, just re-sign everybody, the problem is simple. Every player who has earned a bigger role usually wants a bigger paycheck. And according to the discussion, the Broncos have several important players heading into contract years at the same time. Riley Moss, Mims, Jaquan McMillian, Powers, Evan Ingram, and Brandon Jones were all mentioned in that group. That means the front office has to think carefully. They cannot act emotionally. They cannot pay everyone like there is unlimited money. They have to decide which players are essential, which players can be replaced, and which deals could hurt the roster later. That is why Riley's situation is so fascinating. His best plays are easy to defend. The 19 pass breakups are real. The 53.4 completion percentage allowed is real. The talent is real, but the concerns are also real. The 10 defensive pass interference calls are still part of the record. The 859 receiving yards allowed are still part of the evaluation. The 21 downfield receptions allowed still matter. So if the Broncos are looking at a future extension, they have to ask a difficult question. Are they paying for the flashes, or are they paying for the full picture? And this is where training camp and preseason become critical. If Jody Barron is truly being given a chance to compete at the outside cornerback spot, then Riley Moss is not just competing against expectations. He is competing against another player for trust. That does not mean the Broncos are giving up on him. It means they are forcing the position to be earned. That is exactly how a serious team should operate. Nobody should be handed a major role simply because fans like him or because he made several highlight plays. The role has to be won, and then it has to be protected with consistent performance. For Riley Moss, the path is clear. He does not need to talk about the contract. He does not need to campaign for himself through the media. He needs to make the penalties go down. He needs to limit the big